My name is Randy Bigley. Joining me on the podcast is Post Commander for the Ohio State Highway Patrol here in Crawford County, in Bucyrus actually, right? Lieutenant Ty Skaggs. Good morning.
Morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, I tell you what, we've had some, we had a pretty good winter until lately, for driving anyways. This last one was kind of crazy out there a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Definitely. Past few weeks, month have been a little dicey, and even a little bit of snow that we got the night of the Super Bowl was, you know, just enough to make some slick spots here and there. So definitely, it's been more interesting than December was as far as winter driving.
It seems like lately, it's like the last few years, it's kind of been that way. It's kind of towards January we start getting the bigger snows, don't we?
Yeah, and I remember like when I was younger, it seemed like always the bigger and colder months were January and February, right? And there was a time, well, then December got hit some more, and now it's kind of, you know, things are always changing.
Yeah, they are. It's just the way it goes, I think.
Right, right.
So you guys probably get caught out a lot during bad weather and stuff like that too, with accidents and all that?
Absolutely, and working extra time, overtime guys and gals that work the post have to stay late or come in early to handle the call volume, so that's typical.
What happens, say I would go off the road or you know, go in the ditch or whatever, what do I need to do? What would you do? What would you do first?
Okay, well first, you know, safety is of major concern. You want to make sure that you're in the safest location as possible. Now, obviously, if you slide off the road and you get stuck in a snowbank, you're not going to be able to move. What can you do at that point to make yourself safer? Well, not a whole lot. You can't move your vehicle. You probably don't want to get out and walk around, because if you have trouble maintaining control on that patch of roadway, somebody else may as well. And if you're out walking around, you're much more vulnerable to get struck by another vehicle, vulnerable to injury being a pedestrian, rather than still being an occupant inside the vehicle. You have a little bit more protection there. So you want to think about that, and then you've got to make a phone call, right? So we can get the help out there to you, whether it's us, medics if you're injured, or you know, a tow truck if you just need pulled out and there's no damage. You know, you got to get help out there. So that then leads to, well, you have to do things to prepare before you go out on the road, right? To make sure that you're safe. So you know, making sure that cell phone is charged, and or you have a method, a cord where you can charge that cell phone in there, because that's your lifeline. You know, many decades ago, before cell phones, we didn't have that advantage, but now we have that, but it's only an advantage if we make sure we have the charge on there. There's been many times I've stopped out with people and I said, well, I wanted to call for help, but you know, when I slid off, I only have 5% battery on my phone, and when I tried to call, I dropped the call and I couldn't get help, and so I've been here for half an hour before you showed up. Right, so just a simple thing like that, making sure that you have a good cell phone charge so that you can get the help to you that you need.
I've even done so much when I used to have to drive a good distance to work. I actually packed like a little box that had some kind of snacks in it, had a blanket in it, I had a small portable shovel, even kitty litter, something like that. I was put in there. That's probably all good to have, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I was going to talk about that, you know, making sure you have plenty of fuel in your vehicle, because if you happen to get stuck and you have to wait for a long time, because you may not be the only vehicle, of course, that slides off on the roadway. There may be plenty out there that do the same thing, and you may have to wait for up to 2 hours for a tow truck. And if the snow's still coming down, even a plow trucker, we may not be able to get to you because we have so many calls. So to have fuel to make sure that you can stay warm and not get hypothermia and things like that. So having a good amount of fuel in your vehicle, and then the emergency supplies that you mentioned. Have some food, have some water, some extra layers, you know, coats and everything. I see so many, it seems like especially, you know, kids, my kids, right, they go out there and it's freezing outside, they don't take a coat with them. They're like, well, I'm just getting in and out of the car, I'm fine, you know. It's like, yeah, what happens when we wind up stuck in, you know, a snowstorm?
Yeah, exactly.
So making sure you have that, you know, ability to stay warm is important.
It's funny you said, I just mentioned that to one of my kids. They had the Crocs on. We're just getting out of there. I'm like, you don't even have any socks on. What do you do if something breaks down?
Right, exactly. They don't think about that sometimes.
No.
So, you know, teaching your kids, especially your younger drivers, your teen drivers, it's incumbent upon the parents to make them understand the importance of the preparation. So if they wind up in a situation like that, they're going to be okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, and wait till they've done it one time. And I have, so there you go. But yes, and always probably make sure your car's in good condition with, you want to make sure your battery's good, your wipers are good, all that kind of stuff.
Right, so winterizing your car. You mentioned making sure you got good windshield wipers on there, because nothing worse than heading down there and there's slush on the road and a big semi goes by and throws up a big muddy mess on your windshield, and you go to wipe it off and your windshield wipers aren't up to the task, and all it does is smear it everywhere. Now you can't see. Well, that's obviously an unsafe condition when you're going 50 miles an hour down the road and all of a sudden you can't see. So, you know, making sure those windshield wipers are in good shape, and maybe some sort of window treatment for your windshield, like a Rain-X type product that helps that stuff bead up and shed off of your windshield a lot faster. is very good. I put that on all my cars, and you know, in the wintertime, my personally owned vehicles and my kids make sure they have that on there. In the winter, even more so than the summertime, just because it helps with visibility. Also, just make sure all your fluids are good. Something as simple as that, so that your brakes function properly. You know, all of those things. And then also, you know, your tire pressure is important. If you have, you know, too low tire pressure, then it's not going to grip the same way that it should. The tire tread on your vehicle, if, you know, sometimes people don't look at that. There's a lot of vehicles that I stop out with that maybe have crashed and slid off the road, and I go down there and look, and they're just about slick.
Yeah.
You know, the tires. It's like, well, you need new tires. You have to have a proper amount of tread to get that traction in the snow to make you be able to maintain control while you're traveling down the road.
What's a good way on your own to know how much tread you have on your tire? What's a good way to tell on that?
Well, most tires will have what's called wear bars inside the tread, and those are just part of the tire. It's rubber, and if you reach down and feel inside of your tread, you'll feel these little bumps as you go around, and as the upper part of the tread wears down to get close to that, you're getting to the point where you need, you know, new tires. Otherwise, legally, to be safe, you know, 3/16 of an inch, you can get a tire pressure, or I'm sorry, a tire tread depth gauge that can measure that, or a lot of times the old penny trick, right, where you just take a penny and stick it in there, and if it's, you know, covering any part of, you know, the Lincoln's head, you still technically have, you know, legal tread. But if it's not, or barely touching, you definitely need to get those tires replaced.
Nothing worse than having low tread tires in the wintertime. It's awful.
Yep. And the tire pressure that I mentioned, you know, the pressure inside of a tire, even though there's not a leak, it will decrease as that temperature drops. Sometimes you'll see as you go out and drive, if you have a newer car that has the gauge on there that tells you, it might show you have 30 PSI in there, but as you drive and that tire heats up from the friction in the road, then all of a sudden the PSI will rise just because the temperature rises.
Yeah.
So that's where, even though you may have had good tire pressure in the summertime, come wintertime, just because of the drop in temperature, you may not, and may have to bump those up a little bit.
Yeah, I fortunately my cars both have gauge, you know, their own newer cars, so I'm able to tell that. But the older time, you really need to check on your manually sometimes too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very well. And another thing you talk about fluid, washer fluid is very important too, because there's nothing worse than getting sprayed with salt, and like I said, you go to turn your washers and there's no fluid there; it just smears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So getting a good amount in there, a good brand, you know, don't just put water in there, because that's going to freeze. Number one, you have to actually get a washer fluid that has the kind of things in it that will keep it from freezing when the temperature gets too low, so that it won't just freeze inside there, because if it freezes and you push the button and nothing comes out, it's not going to do you any good. So you want to make sure you have a good product and a good amount of it in there before you drive. How
about cleaning your car? Say you had a big snow and you're leaving and there's a big giant pile of snow on top of your car. Should you clean all that off?
Yeah, definitely. You know, you may think to yourself, well, that's not going to affect me, you know, any, but it could affect the driver behind you and their safety. Also, in going in line with that, a lot of people I see will go out and just clean off just their windshield, or maybe only a portion of their windshield, and then they still got snow covering their side windows and everything. Well, it's important to have that field of view. They think, well, you know, I'm just heading down the road, I just need to be able to see in front of me. Well, to be fully alert of what's going on around you and to practice good, safe driving skills and defensive driving skills, you need to have a wider field of view. So you need to clean your windshield off completely, and your side windows and your back windows. And that's where that pile of snow on top of your vehicle that you spoke about could affect you, because as you're heading down the road and that's blowing off the top, it'll curl around in the back and start to recover your rear window that you just cleaned off. So it could affect you and other drivers as well.
Sure.
And people have probably seen or heard stories of these big chunks of ice. You know, snow is one thing, right? That can blow off and people can use their windshield wipers, but if it's a thing where you haven't driven in several days after a big snowstorm and there's been some melting and refreezing, and that snow has turned into a block of ice on top of your vehicle and you're headed down the road, that could cause damage to the vehicle behind you. I've seen big chunks of ice go through windshields and strike people and cause injuries. Yeah. So definitely want to clean off the top of your vehicle as well.
You always see the semis go down, those big chunks just flying off the top.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That happens.
Speaking of wipers and stuff, you should always have your headlights on too. When if it's raining and your wipers are on, your headlights probably should be on too, correct?
Yeah, and that's actually you know, a section of law that if you have unfavorable atmospheric conditions, rain, fog, snow, sleet, hail, you need to have those headlights on. And some people don't think about it, because even though turning on those headlights, it doesn't help you see any better, it helps other people see you better. So they may not overlook you and wind up pulling out in front of you coming from a stop sign or a private driveway, which could cause an accident. So it's just to help with visibility so other people can see you.
Fortunately, the newer cars, a lot of times you turn the wipers on, the lights will come on, but the older cars don't do that, yeah.
Right. And some people get too reliant upon, as a lot of your newer vehicles have the sensors that, you know, oh, I have automatic headlights, and once it gets so dark, it'll turn on. Problem is, if it's daytime and there's snow or rain or whatever, there still may be enough ambient light in the atmosphere that sensor doesn't pick up on the, you know, the things that is causing you to have to turn your headlights on. It detects there's still enough light in the area, it's not gonna turn those lights on. So people need to keep that in mind and maybe manually turn on their headlights during the daytime when there's bad weather out.
With the winter driving, anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
Yeah, absolutely. Cruise control.
Okay.
So shouldn't use cruise control when there's any kind of anything other than dry, ideal road conditions out. Even in the summertime if it's raining, because of hydroplaning and everything. If there's any kind of slippery or potentially slippery road surface, you have your cruise control on. Well, that thing is being told to keep your vehicle at a certain speed, and that's based upon a sensor that's on your tire, the rotation of your tire. That's how it detects your speed. Well, if you start to slide on a slippery surface, it could continue to try to accelerate, even though you're wanting to slow down.
Oh,
right?
sure, yeah.
And you know, it just causes you to lose control even more, or make it difficult for you to be able to regain control. And then it could also cause, you know, then once that loss of control starts, how do people usually turn off their cruise control? Well, they step on the brake. So if they wind up with a panic braking thing where they're stepping on the brake real hard and they're already starting to lose control, then that could make the situation worse, right? So definitely don't want to use cruise control when you have any kind of slippery road conditions. Definitely stay alert. The kind of things that you should be doing even in regular driving are even more important during winter driving. Avoiding distractions, your radio, your cell phone, things like that.
Eating in your car.
Yeah, eating while driving, right.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder to maintain control. So that you should do always, but it's especially more important when there's slippery road conditions. And practicing defensive driving, because even though you may be driving perfectly safe, not everybody else out there is. And I'm sure a lot of people have driven out there and thought to themselves, man, that person just isn't slowing down for these road conditions, and that's so dangerous. Well, we gotta be, you know, alert and watching for those people, and if they're not doing the things they're supposed to be doing, then we might have to do even more to help protect ourselves. Wearing your safety belt, right, just to prevent injury in case you do get into a crash, but also to help you maintain control of the vehicle. If you start to spin out of control, there's centrifugal forces that can take effect, and you might, just from the G-force pulling on your body, might displace you from your seat and toss you over into the passenger seat. I've seen crashes where this has happened. So not only to help protect yourself from injury, but if you don't have that safety belt on and you start to lose control and spin around and it throws you over into the passenger seat, well, how are you going to be able to even try to regain control of that vehicle if you're sitting in the passenger seat? You can't reach the pedals, you can't reach the steering wheel, right? So definitely wear the safety belt for that reason as well. And maybe consider taking a different route to your destination than you normally do. Maybe on roads that are more well-maintained. You might say, well, this is the shortest distance, this is the way I always go, and I cut across these backcountry roads. Well, they still may be snow-covered and may not have had an opportunity to have a plow hit them yet. So back up, allow more time, and take a different route, and that still may get you there faster, even though it's a longer distance, just because it's on roads that are state routes and things like that have been better treated already. Some other things, we talked about slowing down. That's the biggest thing, is slowing down. You're going to be able to maintain control better. The way you accelerate and decelerate needs to change. You want to accelerate slowly and decelerate slowly. That's going to help you maintain control. And so in order to be able to slow down, people have to plan ahead. So especially if you're getting up and going to work in the morning, you got to set that alarm early. I know it's a horrible thing to do. I don't like to do it either. Have that alarm go off any earlier than I want it to in the morning. I want to get my sleep, but to make sure you get to where you're going safely and avoid injury or damage to your vehicle, you might have to get up a half hour, an hour early to allow the time to, number one, clean off your car, like we talked about, get the snow off there and the ice and let it warm up and melt everything off. And then once you go out on the road, to go slower and maybe take a different route, as we mentioned, to make sure you get to where you're going safely and still on time.
Be patient, right?
Yes, absolutely. Patience is one of the biggest things.
All right. Anything else you want to share?
For winter driving, no.
Okay.
Just other than, as I mentioned before, you know, sometimes we're working extra hours and we may get a lot of calls. If one car is sliding off, there's probably multiple cars sliding off. So also, to have maybe a little bit of patience for us responding to you. We do want to get to everybody as soon as we can to help them out, make them safe, get them out of the ditch and on their way, make sure they're safe and warm. But there's only so many of us, out there, and it's not just us, it's also our local sheriff's departments and our local police departments. They're out there doing a great job as well, responding to these things. So you got all the agencies working together, we all have the same goal, to go out there and make people safe. So maybe understand that, we may not be able to get to you in 10 minutes like we would be able to maybe on a normal day, just because of the volume of calls and the fact that we have to drive slowly as well to make sure we safely get from one place to another. Because if we drive too fast and we spin out and go in the ditch, we're not helping anybody else out there. Right?
True,
so
true.
A little bit of patience on that end of it as well.
Thank you so much for coming in, Lieutenant.
Absolutely.
And we'll have you in more often. We'll talk about all kinds of stuff. How's that sound?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.